She posted, "Married life feels like a prison with him." So I replied, "Sentence over." The next morning her car was gone. The keys were on the counter, and my lawyer was at her door. "My name's Daniel. I'm 34 and I live in Texas. For 5 years, I believed marriage meant two people building a life together, and it meant sharing plans, dividing chores, and choosing each other when things got hard. I worked long hours. I gave up time with friends. I took on extra responsibilities because we had goals, a house with room for guests, holidays that felt like escapes, and a car that fit weekend trips. I thought those things were how you show love. Looking back, I can see I was settling for a one-sided version of partnership. The first crack didn't start with an argument. It started with a post. One night, after a day that felt longer than it should, I scrolled through Instagram and stopped. Emily had posted a photo from brunch with her friends. She was laughing, a drink in hand, sunlight on her hair. The caption read, "Married life feels like a prison with him." I read it 3 times. I sat there with my phone in my hand, trying to make sense of it. A prison. It wasn't the kind of private complaint you whisper to a friend. It was a declaration aimed at anyone who would listen. I thought we had talked through problems before. We had promises. Somewhere along the way, those promises had become empty gestures. I didn't comment at first. I felt a mix of things: hurt, anger, a cold clarity. I'd spent years making sure the bills were paid, keeping things smooth so she could enjoy the life she wanted. I wasn't perfect. I'd missed dinners, spent late nights elsewhere, and said, "I'll make it up," more times than I can count. But I never expected my marriage to be described like a sentence. After sitting with it for a long minute, I typed 2 words and hit send. Sentence over. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was meant to be the end of a chapter that had been suffocating. That night, I called a lawyer. Not in a frenzied way, but with the deliberate calm of someone who had finally decided he deserved better. The lawyer was a friend from college who'd seen pieces of how things had been and quietly agreed that some lines had been crossed for too long. I didn't wait for a reaction. I arranged things with care. The SUV she loved was leased in my name. The house title had my name on it. I made calls and packed a suitcase the way you pack when you mean it, not when you hope you won't have to. Before dawn, I left a note on the counter and slid the house keys next to it. I set the locks to be changed and told the lender to come pick up the vehicle. I moved my important documents and my paycheck routing. I closed shared cards and left enough for basic needs, not for a lifestyle that had been built on my doing everything. When she stepped outside and the truck wasn't there, I imagined the confusion was sharp. I'd seen that car more as a symbol of how we'd prioritize things. Weekend getaways booked in her name. A carefully curated image when company came over. Repossession would feel like a sudden erasure of status. That was part of the point. You can't call someone's life a prison and expect the person you shut down to keep paying for it. At 9 that morning, my lawyer knocked on the door. He handed her papers, divorce filings, bank statements, screenshots. The evidence was simple. A public post that called our life a prison and the financial trail that showed how one person was carrying most of the load. It was clinical and final. She answered the door in pajamas, hair pulled back, confusion on her face. I wasn't there. I had left before anyone woke up. I didn't want a scene. I wanted clarity. The papers did the talking I used to do. They held what words alone couldn't. Proof that I wasn't making a rash decision, but finishing a long one. That morning didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a necessary severing. I drove away lighter than I expected, as if some weight had been lifted simply by being honest about what I'd been carrying. Her reaction wasn't shock for long. It turned into rage. My phone lit up with paragraph after paragraph. The first message accused me of being dramatic. The second called me ungrateful. The third tried to guilt me with lines like, "After everything I've done for you." Then came the classic, "You're overreacting." For years, I'd been the one who gave in during fights. I'd say, "You're right, let's just move past it." I'd let her frustrations take center stage, while mine stayed quiet. This time, silence was my answer. I wasn't going to defend myself against insults. I wasn't going to chase an apology she never intended to give. That silence rattled her. I could tell from the rhythm of her messages. Begging, blaming, bargaining, then begging again. "I'll delete the post. Nobody has to know. We can fix this." But there was no fix left. The damage wasn't the caption. It was years of being treated like I was just the background to her main character story. Some of my friends thought I'd gone too far. They told me I should have at least had a conversation, that maybe she posted it as a joke. But you don't joke about your marriage being a prison unless, deep down, you believe it. And besides, those same friends hadn't been in my shoes. They hadn't lived with the sighs when I said I was working late, the rolled eyes when I suggested saving instead of spending, the constant, "Why don't you ever spoil me anymore?" Later that week, word started spreading. Emily was telling people I blindsided her, that I'd walked out with no warning. She painted herself as the wounded spouse left abandoned by a cold husband. It worked for a few days. People reached out to me, mutual friends, her cousins, even a neighbor. They wanted to know what had happened. I didn't defend myself with long speeches. I simply forwarded them the screenshot of her Instagram post. A single caption did more explaining than I ever could. The silence after that was almost comical. Suddenly, the sympathy she expected dried up. The friends who had nodded along at her brunch table now had nothing to say. You can spin a story all you want, but when your own words are there in black and white, you can't take them back. Walking away wasn't easy. That first week, I barely slept. I lay in hotel beds staring at ceilings, replaying old memories. On our wedding day, she promised we'd face life as a team. The nights we'd stayed up planning vacations. The early years, when I thought love was enough to hold us steady. And then the years after, when she shifted from partner to critic, and I shifted from husband to provider. I questioned myself. Was I too cold? Did I give up too quickly? But every time I second-guessed, I thought about that caption. The public humiliation. The deliberate framing of me as some kind of jailer, when in reality, I'd been breaking myself to give her the life she wanted. The image of her face that morning stayed with me too. The shock of seeing the car gone, the keys on the counter, the lawyer at the door. That was when I knew I'd finally stopped being invisible. For once, the consequences weren't mine to carry. I wasn't her guard. And the hardest part wasn't leaving her. I realized I should have left years earlier. The real twist came about a week later. Out of nowhere, people I barely spoke to started sending me screenshots. Old acquaintances, distant friends of hers, even one of her co-workers. Each one showed the same thing. Emily talking about me behind my back. At parties, she called me boring. With her close friends, she complained I was cheap because I didn't splurge on designer bags as often as she wanted. In group chats, she joked that she deserved a husband who worshipped her. The irony hit hard. I thought I had been that husband. I worked, saved, and sacrificed so she could have the comfort she claimed to want. But apparently, none of it counted. And when the repo man took her SUV, the story really changed. She had no car to pose with, no way to show up to brunch in style. Instead, she had to start asking for rides. The same friends who once cheered her on started getting tired of it. Some of them sent me more posts, proof that she wasn't just venting, she was actively turning me into a punchline. Meanwhile, I stayed focused. I closed the joint credit card. I froze our shared savings. I rerouted my paycheck into a new account. I wasn't cruel. I made sure she had enough for groceries and the basics. But the spa days, boutique shopping, and endless Amazon boxes, those ended overnight. By the second week, her frustration boiled over. She showed up at my office unannounced, mascara streaked down her face, asking the receptionist to let her in. I didn't go down. Security had to walk her out after she raised her voice in the lobby. It wasn't about embarrassment. I just knew if I let her corner me, she'd find some way to twist the narrative. My lawyer told me, no contact, no chances. And I listened. That night, she posted another Instagram gem. A photo of herself with the caption, "Funny how men act like heroes when they're just cowards hiding behind lawyers." I didn't reply, but the comments section told me everything. People weren't buying it. Half the replies said, "Didn't you call your marriage a prison?" The other half simply unfollowed her. The carefully crafted, perfect life image she'd built for years started to crumble in real time. By the third week, she'd lost her shine on social media. No car, no luxury shopping, no doting husband funding her lifestyle. It was like her audience evaporated along with the perks. And for someone who lived for validation, that cut deeper than anything I could have done. For me, it was strange. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't gloating. I just felt this steady calm, like I had finally taken control of a situation that had been slipping away from me for years. Every silence, every closed account, every ignored text wasn't revenge. It was me learning how to draw a boundary and actually keep it. The more her image fell apart, the clearer things became. Emily never wanted a partner. She wanted a stage, and I had been the one working behind the curtains to make sure the lights stayed on. Now, without me, the curtain had finally dropped. A few days before our first court date, her dad called me. I braced myself for anger, maybe even insults. Instead, his tone was heavy but calm. He said, "I just found out you've been paying part of our mortgage for the past year. Why didn't you tell me?" The truth was simple. Emily had asked me not to. Her dad had lost his job for a while, and she said she didn't want him to feel embarrassed. So I quietly covered the gap, month after month. Her parents thought she was the one keeping them afloat. When I stopped the payments after filing for divorce, the truth surfaced. Her dad actually apologized to me. Meanwhile, Emily was getting an earful from them. They weren't angry about the money. They were angry about the lies. She had built her entire story on pride, pretending she was the one holding everything together, when in reality, I'd been covering the cracks. By the time the court hearing came, Her lawyer tried to spin things differently. They painted her as emotionally neglected, as if I had abandoned her long before she ever posted about being trapped. But my lawyer didn't need flowery arguments. He handed the judge a folder with her Instagram post, the screenshots of her messages, and the bank statements showing her spending. The judge barely blinked. The house stayed with me. The car lease was canceled. Alimony, minimal, since she was healthy, educated, and capable of finding work. When we walked out of court, Emily caught up with me in the hallway. For the first time since this whole thing started, she didn't look angry. She looked small. "I didn't mean it like that," she said, voice cracking. "I just felt trapped." For a second, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to the version of her from our early years, the one who laughed with me on road trips and dreamed about our future. But then I remembered every eye roll, every time she mocked me to her friends, every time she chose to post online instead of talk to me. I looked her in the eye and said, "Sentence over means sentence over." Then I walked away. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No shouting. Just an ending that had already written itself. That night, I sat alone with takeout and a glass of water. For the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Weeks later, word got back to me through mutual friends. Emily had moved back in with her parents. The same woman who once bragged about upgrading her life was now driving her mom's minivan, keeping her head down in the grocery store, and quietly deleting old posts from her Instagram. She had built her image on being the picture-perfect wife with the picture-perfect lifestyle. But when that image cracked, there was nothing left to hold it together. People stopped asking her about vacations and new handbags. Now they asked if she was okay. That shift hit her harder than losing the car or the house. As for me, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. Real freedom. I didn't wake up to sighs about how late I was working. I didn't feel that constant undercurrent of walking on eggshells. I didn't have to keep funding a lifestyle that never seemed to make her happy. For the first time, I could breathe without feeling like someone was keeping score. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about finally stepping out of a role I never signed up for. The role of provider without respect, of husband without partnership. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve to be treated like a paycheck with legs. Friends have asked if I'll ever get married again. My answer is honest: maybe someday. But next time, it won't be with someone who needs status or validation to feel whole. It'll be with someone who understands that marriage isn't about who looks happiest online. It's about two people actually showing up for each other when nobody else is watching. Looking back, Emily thought she was clever when she posted that caption. Married life feels like a prison with him. But what she forgot was that every prison has an exit door. I just decided to walk through mine. I appreciate you watching till the end. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more content.